understand, you can always reach out if you can. Or if you're more tech savvy, you can also go and check out
Please try and
blogs, and then
unmute
there
yourself.
is
Can you share the screen
GPT.
with us?
I am not yet sharing the screen. Yeah, I'm not yet sharing my screen, but then I was highlighting those things, telling you that you can always, if there's something that you get like an error, you can either reach out to me or just go straight to Google and you try to search and try to fix that error. And then for those who are still having a bit of a challenge trying to install Flutter on your computers, a tip I gave last time was that you need to have admin rights to your computer, because there are some softwares that actually need administrator rights for them to run. Because Flutter itself may need networking capabilities, so meaning it will need some access to the internet. And this access is only given to Flutter once you've installed it and given it some admin rights. Okay. So that being said, I will jump into today's facilitation, and we're going to be looking at Flutter widgets and how we can make use of them. Yes. So this is what we're looking at today: widgets. Okay. We're going to look at widgets and what they are in Flutter, or the types of widgets. Yeah. But the first thing we're going to look at is basically what we all need to do. How do we first of all create a Flutter application? How do you, now that you've installed Flutter, how do you create a Flutter application? Yeah. So we're going to see how to set things up, setting up your Flutter application. Let's say if you're creating an e-commerce app, how do you create it and name it as an e-commerce app? Yeah. Then we are going to look at certain parts called widget build visualization. How do these widgets actually, the widgets that are in Flutter, because Flutter, most of the components are called widgets. Okay. How are they built? Which one comes before the other? Okay. Which ones can be combined to come up with certain layouts? Then we are going to look at platform specific widgets. By platform, we mean let's say widgets that are only for Android, and then those that are only for iOS. Yeah, those are platform specific widgets. Then layout widgets. These are widgets that control the layout of your screen. Layouts, by layouts I mean, let's say rows, columns. Okay, rows and columns. How do you create rows? How do you create columns? How do you make things move horizontally? How do you make things move vertically? Okay, and then I also look at the two major widgets for state maintenance in Flutter. Okay, which one actually allows you to be able to maintain state, and which one doesn't support it? We're going to also highlight that briefly. Yeah. Then we shall also look at a sample of platform independent widgets, which don't these widgets don't dictate which platform you put them in, whether it's Android or iOS. They have the same types of widgets. And then we shall jump into the coding session. Yeah, so today's presentation is quite short. Most of the time we're going to spend will be in the coding session, whereby we're going to try to see how these things work. Yeah, we're going to write actual code in Flutter, and we try to test some of these widgets, and we have a feel of it. Yeah, to make it practical, because most of our last week's session was not so practical. Yes, we managed to cover concepts, but then for you to be really good at Flutter, you have to get your hands dirty. You have to actually sit down and try to code these items. Yeah. So for you to be able to create a Flutter application, you can open a console. Let's say if I was in on my desktop, I just open a console in it. For that, I'm going to share a new screen, my whole desktop. Yeah. So this is my screen. So let's say if I want to create a new Flutter application, I can to make my folders organized. I can create a folder called apps. Okay, on my desktop. Then inside apps, I can decide to, let's say, create a new Flutter application. So to create a Flutter application, basically we use commands according to this. So I click the stop part. Okay, I click the stop part, and when it highlights that address, I type CMD. So typing CMD simply means I want to open this address inside the command prompt. Okay, that is on Windows. And then I can either type Flutter create, then the app name. I can call it, let's say, Restore. Okay, Restore University. University. Okay, and then it will create for me an app called Restore University. Okay, but then let's say if you're in a situation whereby you are Restore University and there are multiple apps you want to build. Let's say you have an app for managing the library, you have an app for managing the cafeteria, you have an app for admissions. Okay, so there you use the more advanced, you use a more organized way of creating your Flutter apps. So that is where this comes in. I can say hyphen hyphen, then keyword org. Okay, then since Restore is the organization that we are creating an app for, I'll say com.restore university space. Then here it is now more modular, like you have now specifying that the organization that owns this app is called Restore University. Okay, but what is the app in particular for? So it can be library, it can be the cafeteria, it can even be, let's say, if there's a hospital for Restore University or a drug shop or a clinic, you can always name it so that people can book, let's say, appointments and all that for going to the hospital. But for now, let me just name it. Let me name it library. Okay. So the keywords are Flutter create hyphen hyphen org. Then you space. Then now this is what they call a package name. The word pom.restore university is a package name. Okay. So this package here this package name can be used for creating multiple apps. So when you're deploying it, let's say to Restore's Play Store account, they will always know that the organization that owns this app is called Restore University. The app name itself is called library. Yeah. So we can run this. Just enter. But anyway, here they're telling us that this word is reserved. So I can just change it a bit. Restore University app. Okay. So it is super fast. This one doesn't really take long downloading packages from the internet, so you don't need a lot. Okay, you don't need a lot of internet to download this. It's just basic, because when you install Flutter, most of the files that are going to be used for creating this library app will be copied from the Flutter directory itself and then put into this library app. So notice that the word library is reserved. Okay, so they couldn't allow us use this keyword, so we had to change it to library app. So let us open our library app. So here they even give us instructions. They tell that your application code is in library app /lib main.dat. Yeah. So if you noticed in our previous lectures, we talked about main.dat having the main file for running, the main function for running our Flutter apps. So in a Flutter application, the entry file, not even method itself, but the entry file is called main.dat. Okay. So here they tell us to cd into this. So I can cd into the library app. Okay. So when I cd into the library app, I can now decide to open it in VS Code. So let me first close this here. Okay. So here, yes, cd into the app name, which our app was library app. and then we launch it in VS Code. So this is the command we use for launching it in VS Code. We just say code and then space and then a full stop, this period. Okay, this is the command we use for opening the new app that we have created inside VS Code. Why do we open it in VS Code? Because it's VS Code that we are going to use to write our code for Flutter, to develop the Flutter application and run it. Okay, we can't develop it. We can't be able to write if we don't have a code editor. Okay, so for this case, we are going to use VS Code. Yeah, so let me just demo how to open this code. First, go back here. So now that we have cd'd into library app, okay, just clear this. Now that we have cd'd into library app, I can say code, C-O-D-E, and dot. Okay. When I do this, it opens my app in VS Code. Okay. So when you look at this, this is the structure of our app. So it has created for us a folder for Android, iOS, Linux, macOS, web, and Windows. Let's count those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which clearly proves that the hypothesis we were talking about last time, that Flutter currently supports 6 platforms. So platform-specific code. Let's say if you want to add configuration files for Android only, you go to the Android folder. If you want to add configuration files for iOS, you go to iOS. Same goes with the ones for Linux, then Mac OS, then web, and then there's also Windows. But our major focus as we are learning, will majorly be Android. Okay, it will majorly be Android for now. But then you know that we can always share methods to compile the end result, because remember, Flutter, you write using a single code base. So you write code once and then it will run on all those platforms. Yeah, so that's the beauty of it. So we are going to choose to run our code on Android. Okay, our code on Android, run and test it on Android, and then we shall always build and test on other platforms also. Okay, so this is the file that they were telling us, the main.dat file. So this is the entry point for every Flutter program. There has to be a main.dat, and it's found inside the lib folder. Okay, the lib folder is where the main Flutter files are supposed to be put. All your source code is supposed to be put in the Flutter in the lib folder. If you want images and all the other things, you can always create another folder and name it, let's say, assets. Okay, but for today, we are going to majorly look at Flutter widgets, and also we familiarize ourselves with the structure and how we can play around with these widgets to come up with UIs that are nice, right? Yeah. So if you were to look at the basic structure of a Flutter program, there is always a widget that is generated for you when you first create a Flutter program, and it's called a homepage widget. Okay. So as you can see, it's a homepage here. Then it has a build method. So a build method is the one that is used for rendering any other UI. Okay. And that build method is called scaffold usually. Okay. But you can always, of course, dodge this, since Flutter makes it so flexible for anyone to use. Yeah. So a scaffold has something like an app bar. Okay. And then you can also put things such as centers and bodies in a scaffold, really. So a scaffold is like the whole thing that encompasses your Android apps. Yeah. So all other widgets fall under it. Okay. Other tiny widgets, both platform specific and the ones that are independent. Yeah. So look at an example of that. This is how the first code that is generated by the Flutter program looks like. So what we usually do is we remove these comments because they generate a lot of comments. These comments are used to guide you, and sometimes, but you don't usually always need to reuse it. You get to use these comments, so you just remove them, like I'm going to do. So I remove these comments. Okay. So this is basically that code. Whatever you see here is that code. It's just that it's It's in a framework Flutter now. Okay, the same data type string that we are seeing. Okay, these operators, increment operators are here. Okay, yeah. So basically, when you create a new Flutter program, this is the boilerplate code they give you. So this is basically all boilerplate. Boilerplate meaning they give you some code that you can start with and you modify. Yeah. So we're going to just be deleting these comments to make the code shorter. So what we focus on that structure and we first see what we're talking about in terms of the home page. Yeah, so this is like a home page class, okay? So here they're saying class by home page extends a stateful widget, okay? When we looked at object-oriented programming last time, we talked that a child class inherits from a parent class. For this case, my home page is inheriting from a parent class stateful widget. Okay? We shall explain those concepts also. But for now, just look at the structure. When you come to home page, this is for stateful widget, then the real syntax comes and sits here. We're looking at scaffold. Okay? So what does the scaffold have? It has like an up bar, then we have a body. So the body by default can have centered some other widgets. Center widget, and the center widget can have a child. Okay, so here they are saying the child is a column. Okay, yeah. So we are going to run this code later on, since I want most of our sessions today to be practical. We're no longer going to do a lot of theory. The theory, we did most of it when we were looking at the introduction to that. Okay, so a widget build visualization. So widgets can be grouped into multiple categories based on their features. Yeah, platform specific, that is to say Android or iOS, then they are layout widgets, okay, then there are state maintenance widgets, then platform independent / basic widgets. Okay. So let's look at platform specific widgets. So these ones, they belong to a particular platform. For example, Android or iOS. Notice how they're not mentioning Linux or Windows. Okay. Because those platforms like Linux or Windows are not strict. People can use them in any way. You can design programs that have navigation in any way. But then the most important part that you should never take for granted is how people use Android apps and how people use iOS apps. There is a very big difference usually. Yeah, their animations, how their menus look like are always so different. That's why all the documentation that you find out there talks about majorly addressing two types of widgets, for Android and for iOS. So Android specific widgets are designed in accordance with material design guideline by Android OS, and they are called as material widgets, okay? Hence material design. Then the iOS specific widgets are designed in accordance with human interface guidelines by Apple, and they are called as Cupertino widgets. Yeah. So these are some of the examples of the material widgets that we are going to see as we keep on with the development. There is what we call a scaffold, like we looked at it. We looked at it shortly backward. So a scaffold encompasses other items such as an up bar, bodies, and you can also add, let's say, bottom navigation bars to a scaffold. So it's a very, very important aspect of Flutter programming. Most times people use scaffolds. If you're not using a scaffold, then you run into a lot of design issues because it comes with a certain part designed for you that just make everything easy. Then up bars. We shall look at what an up bar is. Okay, we shall look at what an up bar is. Then there is that design for bottom navigation bars. There are those apps such as Instagram. When you look at the bottom, they have bottom navigation bars. Then we also have, let's say, when you look at the X app, it has bottom navigation bars. Then tab bars. Tab bars are also a unique type of bar. It's for navigation, whereby you tap a certain tab and then they show you data. Yeah. But notice that you might not use all these in your apps. Usually, when you have too many types of navigation bars in the same app, you tend to create a UI that is too cluttered and your users get lost in the process. So you're supposed to make, you have to choose one style usually and make it as simple as possible. Use it, design it in a way that users don't get lost. Okay, when you're building an app, we focus on solving a problem. So the fastest way that a user can solve and so use the app and solve the problem is what you aim to achieve. And then there's a widget called a list tile. This is just a normal tile that is used to display certain data. Okay, you shall also see it. Then there are what they call raised buttons. Okay, so raised buttons are buttons that existed in Flutter, let's say 1.2, but currently we call them elevated buttons. Yeah, there are those buttons that look like they are popping up. Then there's what they call a floating action button. Okay, so this is also some important aspect that we shall probably look up in the coming sessions. Yeah. Then we have flat buttons. Flat buttons these days are called text buttons. They are flat. They don't pop up. They are the opposite of what raised or elevated buttons. Then there are icon buttons. An icon can be used as a button in what Flutter. Then there are drop down buttons. Okay. So this is self-explanatory. Drop down. When you touch it, certain items pop out, and then you can choose something. Then there is a pop-up menu button. Okay, so this one pops up, items appear upwards. Then there are button bars. Button bars are used for aligning buttons. Then there's what they call a text field. This is also one very important widget in Flutter. It is used for collecting input from users. So there are actually two types. There's a text field, then there's a text form field. Okay, so their implementations are not so different, but then it's always a matter of choice when you're programming Flutter. Then there's a checkbox. A checkbox is basically used to collect multiple types of data. For example, if you're building, let's say, an app for booking meals in a restaurant, you could check the foods that you want and leave out the ones that you don't want. Okay. Then there is a radio button. A radio button is that which gives you an option to choose one thing. For example, you may use it when you're choosing, let's say, genders. You're trying to program a menu whereby someone can choose their gender as they're signing up. Okay. Then there is a switch. Yeah, a switch is that one that you use for on and off functionalities. So it has one status, on and off, and it's only one button. So things such as switches can be used in your apps for putting menus, such as something to toggle between light mode and dark mode. Since these days a lot of people use dark mode, so you can create like a switch. That's just an example. Then there are sliders. Sliders are basically used to have certain content that is movable. Then there are date and time pickers. These ones are used in Flutter to be able to allow guys to design applications that can be used to pick time, date and time. Let's say if you're signing up and they tell you to choose your date of birth. So rather than typing your date of birth, which usually brings errors because sometimes you can type your date of birth in a form and then the format of the data is really disorganized. Maybe you may decide to start with your month, then the date, then the year. And yet the software is expecting the year, the month, and the date. Okay, so date and time pickers help us eliminate such problems. Then there are dialogues, both the simple dialogue and the alert dialogues. But as of now, it's majorly the alert dialogues that are prominent in Flutter, and they're the ones we shall look at. Yeah. So these are just examples, and that's why I don't want this presentation to be too long. I want us to go into coding and we master the fundamentals. And then most of these other widgets, we can look at them as time goes on. Yeah, then Cupertino widget examples include the Cupertino buttons. This is just a button also, Cupertino picker, then there's a date picker, timer picker, then the Cupertino navigation bar, tab scaffold, tab view, Cupertino text field. Okay, so majorly all Cupertino widgets start with the keyword Cupertino. Okay, that's the only difference. For material, you don't really need to say material, then that's no. But for Cupertino, you actually need the keyword to be able to use that widget. Okay, and also for you to use Cupertino widgets, definitely you import that file for Cupertino. Yeah. Then layout widgets. Layout widgets are what enable us to build applications that make sense in terms of how you align your data. Okay. So for me, by layout, I always try to keep it simple. Rows and columns. How many rows? How many columns? Okay. A row can have multiple columns. Okay. And a column can have multiple rows. So that is the thing about Flutter. You can nest a lot of widgets in form of rows and columns, and just according to how you design it, whether you want it to be easy for guys to use or you want to put too much data in one place, you see how to use how many rows and columns you're going to use. And then some of the most popular widgets that you rarely miss when you're designing Flutter apps is one of them is called container. Okay, we are going to look at that also. Container. What is a container? It's basically a box. Okay, so you can say I want this container, and inside this container I want to put, let's say, a list of images. Okay, so container can have other properties. Okay, like height of the container, width, and then you want its corners to be rounded or you want them to be squared. Okay. So you can give it different properties. You can also change the color, the color of the container. Then there's a center widget. So a center widget is used to center certain items. By centering, it means putting it in the middle of a certain widget. So if you're centering immediately after your scaffold widget, it means whatever you put there is going to be displayed in the middle of the screen of the user. Whether the screen is a laptop, a smartphone, or a tablet, you center it. And then row. A row is a layout widget and it arranges the item in the horizontal direction. Whatever items you put in it. So a row can take in multiple items. You can have a row of text, images, and whatever other widgets you want. Okay, but it arranges them in the horizontal direction. And then we have columns. Columns arrange items in the vertical direction. So you can put as many items in it. So in Flutter, they are called children. A column can have children, multiple children that are arranged in the vertical direction. Okay. Then there's a stack. A stack means arranging one item above the other. For example, in real life, we can have a stack of plates from the very last plate that is always at, let's say, on the floor or at the bottom of a table to the very topmost plate. And always the topmost plate is the one that you access the first. So same case is with Flutter stack widgets. You can stack items on top of each other, meaning there are items that you can even hide by stacking them too much. Okay. Yeah, we shall also look at that probably. Then we have state maintenance widgets. So in Flutter, we have widgets that are either derived from stateless widgets or stateful widgets. So you can have screens that are either stateful or stateless. Okay, and this is also a very big property that determines how data can be manipulated on that widget or that page. For example, if you want to first store, let's say, a user's email and password and try to validate it, it is best that you use a stateful widget, because a stateful widget will be able to store such information for some time on that screen. Okay. And then for the boilerplate code that a Flutter app comes with, there's usually a program for a counter. So a counter is basically a program, in this case, that increases the value of a certain variable by 1 each time you tap a certain button. Okay. So that's what they're saying here. It will increase the internal state of the counter by 1 when you touch that button. So each time you touch a button, the variable is updated, the value is incremented by 1, and then Flutter re-renders, okay? It re-renders the whole thing. Then we have what they call platform-independent widgets. These are simple widgets that don't matter whether you're on Android or you're programming for iOS. A very common example that it rarely escapes each screen is text. Okay? So text is basically something that is used for showing words, okay? You can even use it for showing symbols. So a text widget is independent of a platform. Okay, then there's what they call icons. You can use an icon can take in either a type of Cupertino or a type of what? A type of material. So it's also something that is independent.